The ACC has a settlement with Florida State and Clemson, but could they jump ship to the SEC down the road? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers who are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this is a special day. We don't normally do crossovers with guys from other conferences, but joining us today, our buddy Alex Donno of Locked On ACC and Locked On Canes. And Donno, welcome in, man. Good to have you on here in SEC territory.
Gordy, thank you for having me. You do a tremendous job. And yeah, when I saw the headlines early this week that this settlement was going to happen this week, I was a little surprised it came together this quickly. You know, we've been hearing rumblings for the past 3 weeks or so that, hey, there could be nearing a settlement, the ACC between Florida State and Clemson, who have been suing the ACC for the past year and a half. I thought this was going to take longer, but here we are.
Yeah, I was going to say, take us back a little bit for some of our listeners who are, viewers who may not be familiar with this. This kind of goes back to when all the conference expansion starts happening. We knew Oklahoma and Texas were the first to kind of make the big shift and go to the SEC. And then you had USC and UCLA jump to the Big Ten. And then, you start to have little pieces trickle off here and there. SMU goes to the ACC and so on and so forth. And so Florida State and Clemson were kind of like, hey, waving their hands going, we're kind of two powers right now. We'd like some kind of, if we're going to leave, we'd like to have some kind of lesser buyout from the ACC or some kind of more revenue if we are going to stay. And so that's kind of what happened here, right? That they kind of decided like there's a very uneven revenue share going right now in the ACC after this, right?
After this, yeah, sure. Because the ACC, the reason why Clemson and Florida State, especially Florida State, very unhappy. And I think there's other schools in there, who weren't suing the ACC. I don't think Miami's too thrilled with the TV deal, North Carolina and a few others, because the ACC, they're in a bad TV deal, Gordy, where, ESPN benefits a lot more on their side than the ACC does, because the ACC locked in this super long TV deal with ESPN that runs until 2036. And the big problem with that is we see other conferences like the SEC, Big Ten, even the Big 12 that have shorter term TV deals with their partners. Shorter term deal means when that deal runs out, you get to renegotiate, theoretically get more money. The ACC doesn't have that. So they're having to redistribute the same sort of revenue. And so, being, locked into an unfavorable TV deal, Florida State and Clemson looked at it and said, like, okay, we're getting a lot less revenue than the SEC schools and Big Ten schools are getting or are about to get. And we are not going to have an opportunity for, at this moment, 11 years. But at that time, you're talking 12 years. We're not going to have an opportunity to increase our standing like Florida State and Clemson are saying, hey, how come, we're making the exact same revenue as Wake Forest? For example, I know I drag them in the mud a lot, but, the teams that don't have that same brand power and TV power. And so, one of the concessions that Clemson and the ACC, or Clemson and Florida State, I should say, were looking for from the ACC was, if we're going to create some kind of, harmony here, first thing we need to develop a different uneven revenue split, right? That if your brand, because the ACC is calling this now the brand initiative, if we're getting severely higher TV ratings than some of the other schools, we should be getting more money because of that, because the money is coming from television. So if we're, creating more television revenue, we should be getting more money because of that. And that's one of the concessions the ACC has given, where now 60% of the ACC's revenue pie is going to be paid out based on the brand initiative, which is what I just mentioned, which you get higher TV ratings in football and basketball, you make more money. And there's also this success initiative, where if you do more winning, you accomplish goals on the field, like, you qualify for a bowl game. That's one of the lower milestones. You get to the ACC championship game. You get to the college football playoff. You can also make more money through your success on the field and on the basketball hardwood. That's the success initiative. And that's another concession that the ACC has made. But I think, Gordy, the biggest concession that the ACC has made in settling these lawsuits, where I feel, at least from where I sit, maybe the ACC is giving up too much, is severely decreasing the buyout that it would cost to leave the ACC and seek another conference. Because up until this settlement was ratified and agreed to by every ACC school, there was really no defined buyout, right? The ACC would just say, hey, maybe it's in the 500 million range, and you don't get to take your TV rights with you when you leave the conference. Now, the ACC has defined it where in 2026, the buyout is $165 million, which is still kind of high, but not that high. But it decreases by $18 million every year after that until it gets to just $75 million for the buyout in 2030, 2031, which just happens to be the same year that the SEC is going to be locking in a new TV deal, and the Big Ten is going to be locking in a new TV deal. So that could be an opportunity to buy your way out for a more affordable $75 million to make your way into a power conference.
So what is everybody? I mean, like, okay, so they're locked in now. I mean, is everybody harmoniously kind of just, is everybody okay? Like, are they going to play nice? Does everybody look at Clemson and Florida State as good business partners now? I mean, it seems like, at least for now, there's some short-term stability.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think the ACC and their lawyers maybe lost the game of chicken here, because I think that it seemed to me like the ACC and Commissioner Jim Phillips were a little bit more bothered by the lack of harmony than Florida State and Clemson were. I think that they didn't mind, maybe a little bit of some negative PR, but we don't mind because we feel like we're doing the right thing for our brand. I think it reached a point with the ACC where they're like, we can't keep doing this where two of our member institutions are suing us, and it's possible others might sue us if we don't make some concessions here. So I think if I'm ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, I think where he feels like he got a victory is I can actually sleep again, like for the next 5 years, that we kick the can down the road where, we're all going to at least be happy and hold hands and sing Kumbaya until 2030. And we don't have to worry about litigation and upcoming court dates and stuff. So yeah, I think everybody is, Clemson and Florida State included, are going to be willing to play nice for the next 5 years. I think they have accomplished that.
More with Alex Donno in just a second, but I want to remind you guys about our friends at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, and that is Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use our promo code SH5, and that'll get you 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Go check them out today. We'll resume our conversation with Alex Donno, host of Locked On ACC and Locked On Canes. And Donno, news broke that Texas and Oklahoma were going to leave the Big 12 for the SEC more than 4 years before they were expected to join the league. And then the Big Ten announced USC and UCLA would be joining 2 years in advance as well. So, these announcements come years out. I don't know if it's necessarily like we'd have to wait till 2030 for some of these teams to be talking to the SEC about expansion. But let me pose this question to you. Which teams do you think could leave to come to the SEC down the road? And who do you think the SEC would want from the ACC?
Yeah, the obvious choices, the teams that either the SEC or the Big Ten would like to grab are Florida State and Clemson. I know some of the chatter out there has been like, hey, maybe the SEC wouldn't want them as much because they already have a footprint in state of Florida and in South Carolina. I still feel like they add value there. I know there's been a lot of chatter about North Carolina as well. They bring, I mean, we see the way that they're investing in football. We'll see if the Belichick experiment works out or not, but they're taking a big swing. And I know they're also investing a lot more into their facilities and their NIL. And then, of course, Tar Heels basketball. Obviously, they're on a down year this year, but that's, massively successful program and a massively big brand in hoops. So I think North Carolina is underrated. And Miami is another one that's really interesting. I feel like Miami's a bit of a sleeping giant in this sense. It's a private school with a big endowment and some big time donors. And Miami's really been, and I'm happy about this as the Locked On Canes host and an alum of Miami, that they're finally investing more into their football program. And I also think they've gotten a wake-up call in basketball, so they're going to start investing more in basketball as well. And they saw some more success on the field last year. They're going to try to continue that. And I've been saying for the last couple of days, Gordy, that I think when it comes to this settlement, yeah, everyone is talking about Florida State and Clemson, but low-key, I think Miami and UNC are actually the biggest winners here, because they get to potentially reap the same benefits. They have opportunities to make more money with those same initiatives. And they got to do this without spending, millions of dollars on legal fees and, having to buy these expensive lawyers and take the ACC to court and all the, questionable press that has come with. But I think Miami and UNC are big winners here, because they have the opportunity to reap similar benefits that Florida State and Clemson are reaping without having to actually take the ACC to court. And so maybe Miami's, school president and UNC's chancellor, they may owe like a gift basket to Clemson and Florida State for doing a lot of the dirty work for them here.
Yeah, it's fascinating when we talk playoff expansion, because, right, I mean, when we heard Texas and Oklahoma, it was like, well, Texas makes a little bit of sense. It's only a few hours past College Station, and, it's not that far. And then Oklahoma, I guess, yeah, you're just south of Dallas, and so you're not, you're next to Arkansas, so it kind of makes sense geographically. But I think we've all kind of said Clemson, Miami, and Florida State just make the most sense. They're in the SEC footprint. I mean, anybody who's made the drive from, I don't know, Alabama or Mississippi over to Florida, to Gainesville, you pass through Tallahassee when you're driving through the Panhandle, and then you're only a couple hours south of Gainesville. Just go to the tip of Florida, and there's Miami. So I've always said they make most sense. But what people have always told me, Donno, is forget like geography from a standpoint of like, they look at it and go, we already have the Florida Gators.
Yeah.
We don't need the state of Florida.
Right.
But then again, you added Texas and you already had Texas A&M. So, but that's where I've always heard the North Carolinas come up, because they go, oh, we have South Carolina because they're in South Carolina. North Carolina is a whole nother state we can grab of eyeballs. But again, I think most SEC fans just would say, from a competitive standpoint of just like power programs, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State would all be welcome additions to the SEC.
Yeah, and I think one of the underrated things about Miami, and I can make a counter argument to my own argument. I'd make a terrible lawyer if I argue with myself, but an argument for Miami is it's one of the larger TV markets in the country. I think they're top 12, which is obviously a kind of a rarity for college football. I mean, you got your California, and Southern California is represented in the Big Ten, but you don't have a lot of representation from big TV markets. Miami does give you that. I guess the counter argument to that would be there is a big Gators alumni base in Miami, so they do reap some of that benefit from eyes on the set in the Miami Fort Lauderdale market from Gator fans. But Miami, they do well. They do well on television. I know people make the empty seat jokes for the stadium, but television they always do. They always do very well. So that would be an argument for Miami, whether it would be potentially SEC or Big Ten. And obviously the Big Ten does not have that footprint in Florida, certainly not South Florida at the moment. But one of the big arguments would be you could get yourself into one of the larger TV markets in America.
Isn't part of this, though, like when the SEC added Oklahoma and Texas, I think we all said, oh, awesome, two big brands. But it makes it much more difficult than everybody. And I always say my motto is someone has to suck. Like there's got to be more Wake Forest and those kind of schools that can be beat up on. Like, because, not everybody's going to go 6-6. Like there's going to be somebody who's really good. There's going to be somebody who's really bad. But like, I just wonder, like, what's the appeal other than dollars? And obviously money, moves mountains. But like for those schools, like is that even a good idea for Miami to go join an SEC where they might be just a middle tier team in that conference?
That's a great point you bring up, and so some good friends of mine who cover Miami as well have brought this up that it would be a risk to join a power conference. Well, I mean, they're technically you're already in a power conference. To join one of the two, super conferences, it would be a risk. Like as long as the ACC for the foreseeable future has your automatic CFP tie-ins, right? Assuming you're going to have at least one auto bid, probably two auto bids, that, yeah, I mean, you have an opportunity to be a bigger fish in a small pond. And that's another thing why, I do see some value, a lot of value in these brand initiatives and success initiatives. Like I know the uneven revenue split is not popular with certain people who kind of, have this old mindset of college football. The conference model is always an equal payout no matter who you are. But yeah, I mean, if you're a Miami and maybe UNC, if you do stay in the ACC long term, even if Florida State and Clemson do leave, you still have automatic playoff bids that are up for grabs, and you can do that without having to play, Texas, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, LSU in consecutive weeks. That there is value to that because you go into a super conference like the SEC, it's a meat grinder. And if you're not very good, you're going to get exposed in a way you're not going to be in the ACC.
Last thing for you, Donno, and appreciate you taking some time. The topic has come up on playoff expansion, and that the topic is on the table that we could go from a 12-team playoff to 14 or 16 as early as 2026. We'll see, where we are on that. But what do you make of the talk when the SEC and Big Ten start kicking around? Well, if we do that, we want 4 automatic bids. The ACC would get 2. I mean, I'm curious because I haven't talked to an ACC person yet on what your thoughts are on there, where the two big conferences are playing bully.
I mean, listen, from an ACC or a Big 12 point of view, it's troubling, but it's understandable because we all know the SEC and the Big 10 have leverage, and they have already exercised that leverage. And guess what? As much as I hate it from an ACC point of view, the ACC commissioner, Big 12 commissioner, all the G5 commissioners agreed to give the power to the SEC and the Big 10 to basically adapt the playoff format the way that they see fit. So it's not surprising. It is threatening when you're not in one of those conferences because if you talk about expanding to 14, which may be more likely, I know 16 is on the table. If you talk about expanding to 14, okay, you're guaranteeing 8 bids to the SEC and the Big 10. And then you've got the other 6 bids, maybe the ACC and Big 12 get 2 auto bids, but then you've also got independent Notre Dame, who's going to be in, most years probably, and then maybe 1 G5 spot. You're talking about scraps for the rest of them. So it's like, I know I've seen some people throughout there oh, how dare the SEC and the Big 10 do this? And how dare anybody agree to this? But I get it. I get it that they have leverage and they want to exercise that leverage. And, they also, make the argument as, much as I don't always like it, that more of the schools from those conferences are bringing eyes to the set when it comes to playoff time than teams in the ACC and the Big 12. So I don't like it, but I understand it, Gordy.
All right, I lied. One more quick one. Carson Beck going down to your neck of the woods. What's the latest? Because this is a pretty serious injury he suffered in a play, in a postseason game. What's the timeline? Does it sound like he's going to be healed and ready to go by the start of the season?
Yeah, so I was able to see Beck in person on Monday. Miami held their first spring practice, and he is not cleared to throw yet, which is expected, but he was involved in non-throwing drills, and he's out there practicing with the team. And he's also, Gordy, I took a long look at his right arm. He's not wearing any sort of a brace or a sling or a sleeve on the right arm. And Mario Cristobal said it was late last week, Cristobal was on Sports Center, and he said he thinks Beck is going to be cleared to throw within a couple of weeks. So that's great news. I mean, I've heard only positives on his recovery, but again, he's not been able to throw for the past few months. So I guess my hope would be, so Miami is in their first week of spring football right now. They're off next week for spring break, and then they resume the 4 following weeks. So, I mean, if you look at the most optimistic timeline, Beck might be cleared to throw by the second week of spring ball, which is about 2 weeks from now. So I don't know if it's going to be quite on the optimistic end, but I think we could be pretty optimistic with another 4.5 weeks of spring ball that Beck is going to be able to throw at some point before spring is over. And they need it because everyone knows he's QB1. And, we want Beck to get as much work as possible with his new teammates.
You guys just missed the playoff this past year. Man, it would be, I mean, if we could write a storybook, can we get a Miami, Georgia playoff game? I mean, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yes, it would be. That would be so tremendous. Oh, that would be made for TV. Like you do like an over under 600 times that like they just zoom in on Beck's face on TV and his family at the game. Yeah, we need that, Gordy. We need it.
Yeah, I don't know though. It might be advantage Kirby Smart. He knows all of Beck's weaknesses, so maybe it's advantage Kirby Smart in Georgia, but certainly we will see if that happens. Alex, really appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for joining us, and don't be a stranger. All right, we'll take your ACC teams anytime in the SEC.
Well, hands off, Gordy, but thank you for all you do, man. Tremendous show.
All right, more Locked On SEC coming your way after this. All right, rolling along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Appreciate Alex Donno for joining us to talk about, ACC and who the SEC could potentially add from the ACC down the road. Let's get to, we got some tidbits going on around the conference, so let's dive right into it, guys. And starting over at Georgia, Jalen Walker, not going to be part of Georgia's Pro Day coming up on March 12th due to a quad strain. This was reported by ESPN's Jordan Reed on Tuesday afternoon. Jalen Walker will instead hold a private workout for NFL scouts a little over a month later, coming up on April 17th. That'll give him time to heal from the injury and, hopefully get in the best shape he can. He's considered one of the top edge rushers in this year's draft class. And Reed reported that Walker injured his thigh during a fateful training session. Injury is not considered to be serious, but it's serious enough that Walker isn't going to take any chances to try to be a hero just to take part in Georgia's Pro Day. But that private workout that Walker will hold in mid-April will be in front of NFL execs and scouts alike. In the latest mock draft, Reed has Walker listed as the number 15 pick overall. Meanwhile, Mel Kiper has him as the number 8 overall player on his big board. So a lot of people think very highly of Jalen Walker. Wish him the best of luck. But yeah, it's always stuff like this, like, soft tissue or something like that, like cost a guy on draft day and he drops and somebody gets a steal. Like some really good team on the back end of the first round takes him. And it's like, oh, yeah, maybe you should have taken that guy. Maybe the injury wasn't that big of a deal. All right, other news over at Florida, DJ Lagway talking on the Robert Griffin Out of Pocket podcast and said that Billy Napier being on the hot seat last year gave the Gators motivation down the stretch. Lagway saying that was definitely motivation because I feel like they were disrespecting our coach, disrespecting us. So we had to go out there and show them what we had. Obviously, it took some bumps in the road, a lot of ups and downs, but I feel like in the end, we pulled it all together and figured it out. And we're hoping to carry that momentum into the 2025 season. Of course, the schedule is still very brutal for Florida, but no denying what Florida did down the stretch of last year, beating top 25 ranked LSU, top 25 ranked Ole Miss, Florida State, and then a good Tulane team in their bowl game. And Gators finished 8-5. And a lot of people thought Billy Napier was going to be fired last year. He definitely was on the hot seat going into the year, and he rebounded. And now he's got DJ Lagway. And if that defense can step up, who knows? Florida may have a say in all this in the SEC this year. Meanwhile, over at Alabama, ESPN's Chris Lowe writing that Alabama, after coming off their worst regular season record since 2007, Kalen DeBoer under some pressure. No room for excuses, Chris Lowe writing. ESPN's college football experts put together a list of teams with the most approved this year. Penn State got multiple votes, Florida State, USC, but Chris Lowe picked the Crimson Tide. Here's what he said. He said, when is there not something to prove at Alabama? Nick Saban won 6 titles in Tuscaloosa. There was always an embedded responsibility to continue feeding that monster. And now as Kalen DeBoer enters his second year at Alabama, the last thing anybody in and around the Tide program wants is to go a second straight season without making the playoff. DeBoer and his staff have recruited well. He was able to bring Ryan Grubb in as his offensive coordinator. DeBoer will have more of his fingerprints on this 2025 team. There should be a better overall understanding among the players on how he rolls. Either way, doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize how important this next season is for DeBoer and the Bama program. Of course, Bama opens the season with Florida State. They will also host Wisconsin and visit Georgia all before the month of September is over. So it is going to be a challenging season for Kalen DeBoer. But if you can figure out that quarterback thing, they may be in good shape. Hey, the College Football Playoff Committee announced yesterday their new chair and several new members on the selection committee. The new chair will be Mack Rhoades, Baylor athletic director. He replaces Ward Manuel, who served in that role last year. Committee also announced several other new members this season. Former Michigan State coach Mark D'Antonio, Damon Evans, Ivan Mizell, Chris Massaro, and former Ole Miss tight end Wesley Walls. The group of committee will begin 3-year terms starting this coming season. Outgoing members include Ward Manuel, Chet Gladchuk, Jim Grobe, Will Shields, and Kelly Whiteside. There's one additional change to the committee. Former Mizzou coach Gary Pinkel has stepped down from his post due to other commitments. He will be replaced by former CFP selection committee member Steve Weiberg for this season only. So interesting group. Ivan Mizell, obviously former sports writer, spent time at Sports Illustrated, ESPN, very well respected. So interesting group there. And I've heard good things about Mack Rhoades. So hopefully he brings that common sense approach to the room. But, look, is he going to show a little bit of favoritism to the Big 12? Time will tell. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes with some new folks, some new blood in that selection committee room. Over at University of Texas, reports came out last week that they're raising football season ticket prices by $13 a game next year. Already one of the richest programs in the nation, and they're trying to meet rising costs. Athletic Director Chris Del Conte announcing the price increase and detailed the program's expected finances. And of course, upon the final approval of the landmark $2.8 billion lawsuit settlement with players and receiving revenue share. But Texas will have nearly $30 million in new costs and about 200 new scholarships across all sports. The increased scholarships will cost about $9.2 million, and the school plans to pay $20.5 million annually in their revenue share. So Chris Del Conte saying, look, we're doing this because we want to maintain Texas as the best athletic department in the country. And that's what always is interesting is it comes back on the fans. Hey, you want to be good at athletics? Write a check. So it's never ends. The hand out asking for more money at all these schools. Hey, in hoops news, ESPN bracketology expert Joe Lunardi was talking about some of the teams on the bubble, and one of the big teams on the bubble, Georgia. Joe Lunardi on ESPN on Tuesday night talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, and they did pull out their win over South Carolina. They beat Georgia 73-64. So Georgia improves to 19-11 overall, 7-10 in the SEC. They're sitting in a good spot. See if they can get one more regular season win, or at least a win or two in the SEC tournament, and they should be sitting pretty. Meanwhile, Kentucky really bounced back in a big way after their loss to Auburn, crushing LSU at Rupp on Tuesday night, 96-64. Rough go there for Matt McMahon and LSU. Another basketball note here, Florida State is looking for their next head coach. A couple ties to some SEC folks. Andy Kennedy, who's the head coach at UAB, he reportedly is on the short list of candidates. He, of course, was the Ole Miss head coach from 2006 to 2018. And then Arkansas State coach Brian Hodgson, he's in his second season as Arkansas State's head coach, but he was previously an assistant at Alabama under Nate Oates from 2019 through 2023. One other note here on hoops, Mark Sears at Alabama says he wants a rematch with Tennessee in the SEC tournament. On Tuesday, Sears was talking about, wanting a rematch with some of their rivals, some of the teams they lost to. He said, hopefully in the SEC tournament, we'll be able to see Tennessee and all the teams we lost to. Teams that beat Alabama in the SEC schedule include Ole Miss, Auburn, Mizzou, and Tennessee. The Tide will get a shot at revenge against Auburn on Saturday. We'll see what they're able to do in that one. But, yeah, I think everybody wants to see. That'd be great to see an Alabama-Tennessee rematch in the SEC tournament. And there you have it. This is the latest news going on around the conference. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for the end of March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Our thanks to Alex Donno for joining us, talking about the ACC and their settlement and the future of college football. And could there be more SEC expansion down the road? Certainly it's a possibility. I'm Chris Gordy. Thank you guys for checking us out. Come on back tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.